You know how it feels when your gut punches you before your brain even catches up? That was me last Friday. I was scrolling through Instagram, not expecting much, just killing time between errands. My wife, Amy, had posted some photos from her work trip. She doesn't post a lot, so when I saw her face pop up in my feed, I stopped. At first, it was just the usual. Her at some conference hall, smiling in front of a big banner. Nothing weird. But then I swiped to the next photo, and that's when my chest tightened. There he was. Some guy, arm around her shoulder like he'd earned the right. A big, stupid grin plastered on his face. And the worst part? Amy didn't look uncomfortable. Hell, she was smiling too, leaning into him. It wasn't the kind of smile you give a coworker. No, it was softer, more personal. It was a smile I thought was just for me. I stared at the screen, my thumb frozen midair. My head started spinning with questions I didn't want to ask. Who was this guy? Why was he so cozy with my wife? And why did she think it was okay to post this? But instead of jumping to conclusions right away, I did what any man in my position would do. I saved the photo. I didn't want it disappearing later, and I sure wasn't going to ask her about it without proof. Then, I scrolled down to the comments, praying someone would clue me in. Sure enough, there it was, buried beneath her coworker Karen's heart emojis and her boss's bland, "Looks great" comment. His name was Mark. "Great seeing you this weekend, Amy. Hope we can grab drinks again soon," he wrote. Again? Drinks? What's that supposed to mean? My heart was pounding now. Every rational part of me wanted to stay calm, but the truth was, I felt the heat rising in my chest. This wasn't just a picture. This was a crack in the wall I'd been ignoring for months. Late nights at work. Those stupid inside jokes she'd mention and laugh about but never explain. And now, this dude Mark. I shut my phone off and tossed it onto the couch. My hands were shaking. Was I overreacting? Was this some kind of misunderstanding? I tried telling myself it was harmless, just a coworker being friendly. But deep down, I already knew better. That smile wasn't harmless. That look wasn't innocent. I didn't sit around for long. That's not me. When something doesn't feel right, I face it head on. I grabbed my keys, slammed the door behind me, and headed to her office. I didn't even think about what I'd say or how it'd look. All I knew was that I wasn't going to sit at home like some clueless idiot while this played out behind my back. When I got there, her car wasn't in the lot. That's when it hit me. She wasn't supposed to be back until Sunday. So where was she? I sat in my truck for what felt like an eternity, staring at the empty spot where her car should have been. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of things. If she wasn't at the office, and she wasn't home, then where was she? I pulled my phone out again, thumb hovering over her contact. Calling her felt too obvious, too desperate, but I needed answers. Instead, I opened her Instagram again, hoping maybe the caption on the photo would give me something. I had missed it before in my anger, but now I saw it. Great weekend with the best team. I snorted, bitter and sharp. Grateful? For what? For this Mark guy? For a work trip that suddenly seemed less about work and more about something else? The rage was building again, and I knew I had to do something before I lost it completely. I scrolled back through her posts, trying to piece together a pattern. Amy was meticulous about what she shared online. Nothing too personal, nothing that could make her look bad. She was careful, controlled. But this photo, with Mark's arm draped around her like he owned her, that wasn't like her at all. I started digging deeper. Not in the obsessive, detective way, but just enough to make sure I wasn't crazy. Mark's account was tagged in the photo, so I clicked it. His profile was public. Of course it was. Guys like him always seem to have that unearned confidence, like they don't care who's watching. His page was full of gym selfies, pictures of him with friends at bars, and there it was, more photos from the work trip. There were a couple of him and Amy. One of them laughing at a restaurant table, glasses of wine in front of them. Another of them standing too close at some scenic overlook. No captions that gave anything away, but the pictures spoke for themselves. My stomach churned. I couldn't sit still anymore. I needed to find her, to look her in the eye and ask her point blank what was going on. But she wasn't answering her phone, and I didn't have a clue where she was. So, I did something I'm not proud of. I logged into the Find My Phone app we'd set up years ago in case either of us lost our devices. She didn't know I still had access. I wasn't planning to abuse it, but this wasn't the time to care about privacy. Her location popped up almost immediately. Some fancy hotel downtown. My jaw clenched. She wasn't even trying to hide it. I didn't waste time thinking. I started the truck, slammed it into gear, and headed straight for that hotel. Every second felt like an eternity. My hands were gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white, and my jaw ached from how hard I was clenching it. But none of that mattered. All I could think about was the look on her face when I walked through that door. By the time I got there, I was seething. I parked haphazardly, not caring if I was in a spot or not. The lobby was crowded with people, but I didn't notice any of them. I walked straight to the front desk and, without thinking, barked, "What room is Amy Peterson in?" The girl behind the counter blinked at me, startled. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't." "She's my wife," I snapped, cutting her off. "I need to talk to her." Her eyes darted around, and for a second, I thought she was going to call security. But then she glanced at her screen and said, reluctantly, "Room 812. I didn't even thank her. I was already moving, taking the stairs two at a time because waiting for the elevator was out of the question. By the time I hit the 8th floor, I was out of breath, but adrenaline kept me going. I found the door, 812, the numbers practically glaring at me, and stopped. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. For a second, I hesitated. Not because I was scared, but because I knew whatever was on the other side of that door was about to change everything. I knocked. Hard. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. I could hear movement inside. A shuffle, a muffled voice. And then, finally, the door cracked open. And there she was. Amy, standing there in a hotel bathrobe, her hair damp like she'd just gotten out of the shower. Her eyes widened when she saw me, and for a split second, she looked guilty. But then her face hardened, like she was bracing herself. "Jake, what are you doing here?" Her voice was calm, but I could hear the edge of panic beneath it. Before I could answer, another voice called out from deeper inside the room. A man's voice. "Hey, babe, who is it?" That was it. That was the moment everything snapped. I didn't wait for her to explain. I pushed past her into the room, my eyes already searching for him. And there he was, Mark, standing there in nothing but a pair of boxers, holding a bottle of champagne like he didn't have a care in the world. He froze when he saw me, and for a second, none of us moved. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "Who are you?" I growled, my voice low and dangerous. Mark opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked at Amy, like she was supposed to save him. But Amy just stood there, her face pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. And that's when I realized she wasn't going to explain. She wasn't going to deny it. Because there was nothing to deny. She'd been caught, red-handed. The silence was unbearable, and my anger reached a level I didn't even know existed. I didn't wait for either of them to speak. I stormed into the room, fists clenched so tight I could feel my nails digging into my palms. "Get your clothes on," I barked, pointing at Mark. My voice was steady, but the fire behind it was unmistakable. "Now." Mark froze, wide-eyed, but he didn't argue. He set the champagne bottle on the dresser and scrambled to grab his pants from the chair. I didn't take my eyes off him, my chest heaving with every breath. The coward couldn't even look me in the eye. Amy tried to step in front of me, her hands raised like she was calming down a wild animal. Jake, please, just let me explain. Explain? I cut her off, my voice rising. Explain what? That you're cheating with this guy in a hotel, while I'm at home thinking you're at a conference? Her face twisted, and I could see tears welling up in her eyes. Good. She should feel bad. But I wasn't about to let her crocodile tears distract me from what was happening here. Mark fumbled with his shoes, clearly desperate to escape. I stepped closer to him, my presence looming over him like a storm cloud. Don't think you're walking out of here without answering some questions, I said, my voice low and sharp. Look, man, Mark stammered, his voice shaky. I didn't know she was married, I swear. Lie, I roared, cutting him off. You expect me to believe that? You've been posting pictures with her all weekend. You knew. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing like he was choking on his lies. He opened his mouth to argue, but I wasn't interested in hearing anything else from him. I jabbed a finger toward the door. Get out. Now. He didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed the rest of his stuff and bolted, practically tripping over his own feet on the way out. The door slammed shut behind him, and then it was just me and Amy. She was still standing there in that bathrobe, looking small and fragile. I hated that part of me that wanted to comfort her, to make it all better. But that part was drowning in a tidal wave of betrayal and rage. I turned to her, my voice calmer now but no less furious. Start talking, and don't you dare try to lie to me. She hesitated, her lip trembling. It's not what it looks like, Jake, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. Not what it looks like. Amy, I just caught you with another man in your hotel room. What else could it be? She looked down, her hands clutching the edge of her robe. For a moment, I thought she was going to stay silent. But then she took a shaky breath and said, It just happened, okay? I didn't mean for it to. You didn't mean for it to? I interrupted, my voice rising again. What? Did you just trip and fall into his bed? Jesus, Amy, you've been lying to me for weeks, maybe months, and you're still trying to act like this is some kind of accident? She flinched at my words, tears streaming down her face now. I didn't want to hurt you, she said, her voice cracking. Too late for that, I snapped. You already did. And now you're standing here, trying to play the victim like you didn't just blow up our entire life. Her shoulders shook as she started to sob, but I didn't feel sorry for her. Not this time. I'd been bending over backward for her, trusting her, supporting her, and this was how she repaid me. Why, Amy? I asked, my voice quieter now but still filled with anger. Why would you do this? Was I not enough for you? Was our life not enough? She shook her head, wiping at her face with trembling hands. It's not about you, Jake. It's about me. I felt trapped, okay? I felt like I was losing myself, and Mark, he made me feel alive again. Alive? I repeated, my voice dripping with disdain. So what? Sleeping with him is your idea of finding yourself? Destroying our marriage is your way of feeling alive? She didn't answer. She just stood there, sobbing quietly, unable or unwilling to defend herself. And for the first time, I realized how completely broken we were. There wasn't going to be a way to fix this. Not after what she'd done. I grabbed my phone, snapped a picture of the room. Amy standing there in her bathrobe, the bed unmade, the champagne bottle on the dresser. Proof. Not that I needed it for myself. I'd never forget this moment. But for whatever came next. I'm done, I said finally, my voice cold and final. You've made your choice, Amy. I hope it was worth it. And with that, I walked out, slamming the door behind me. I didn't look back. I couldn't, because if I did, I knew I might never leave. And she didn't deserve that. Not anymore. When I left that hotel room, I wasn't thinking straight. My head was spinning, my chest felt like it was caving in, and my fists were still clenched so hard I thought I might break something. My knuckles, the steering wheel, maybe both. I drove aimlessly for a while, the city lights blurring together as my mind replayed everything over and over. Amy, the hotel room, Mark, her pathetic excuses. Alive. That word kept echoing in my head. She needed to feel alive? What about me? What about the life we'd built together? Didn't that mean anything to her? All those years, the late nights working overtime to give us a future, the sacrifices I made so she could chase her dreams. And for what? So she could throw it all away for some loser who probably didn't even remember her middle name? Eventually, I pulled into an empty parking lot and just sat there, staring out the windshield. The anger started to fade, replaced by something heavier, something worse. The reality of it all hit me like a sledgehammer. My wife, the woman I'd loved, trusted, and planned my entire life around, had betrayed me, and not just once. This wasn't a drunken mistake or a lapse in judgment. This was deliberate. She had lied to my face, time and time again, while she was sneaking around with him. I couldn't just let it slide. I wouldn't. I opened my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found the one person I knew I could count on. My brother, Tom. He picked up on the second ring. Jake? What's up, man? You okay? His voice was calm, but I could hear the concern creeping in. No, I said, my voice raw. I'm not okay. Amy's been cheating on me. There was silence on the other end for a moment, and then, what? Are you serious? Dead serious, I said, my teeth gritting. I caught her. At a hotel. With him. Jesus Christ. Tom's voice was sharp now, filled with anger on my behalf. What happened? I told him everything, sparing no details. The photos, the hotel, Mark, her excuses. By the time I finished, I felt drained, like I'd poured every ounce of energy I had left into those words. Oh man, Tom muttered. I don't even know what to say. I'm sorry. What do you need? You want me to come over? We can figure this out. I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. I don't know what I need. I needed to tell someone. I feel like I'm losing my mind. You're not, Tom said firmly. She's the one who screwed up, not you. Don't forget that. We talked for a while longer, and by the time I hung up, I felt a little steadier. Not good, exactly. There was no fixing this, but at least I didn't feel like I was spiraling anymore. But there was still one thing I needed to do. I drove home, the house dark and quiet when I pulled into the driveway. Walking through the front door felt surreal, like I was stepping into someone else's life. The pictures on the walls, the furniture we'd picked out together, the little details that made this place ours, it all felt like a lie now. I went straight to the bedroom, grabbed a duffel bag from the closet, and started packing. Not for me. For her. Every piece of clothing, every personal item, every reminder of her. I stuffed it all into that bag with a grim determination. By the time I was done, the room looked emptier, cleaner, like I was scrubbing her out of my life. I set the bag by the front door, then grabbed a pen and paper. My hand shook as I wrote, but I didn't stop until I'd said everything I needed to say. Amy, you made your choice. You don't get to have me and him. You don't get to play the victim and tell me it just happened. You don't get to pretend like this wasn't deliberate. I loved you. I gave you everything I had. And you threw it all away for what? A fling? Some fantasy about feeling alive? Well, I hope it was worth it, because you just lost the one person who would have stood by you through anything. Don't call me. Don't text me. Don't try to explain. We're done. Your things are packed. Don't come back here unless it's to get them. Jake. I left the note on the kitchen counter, right where she'd see it when she came home. Then I grabbed my keys and walked back out the door. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there. Not tonight. Not with her ghost still lingering in every corner of that house. As I drove away, I felt a strange sense of relief, like a weight had been lifted off my chest. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt like I could finally breathe again. I didn't sleep that night. I drove to Tom's place, let myself crash on his couch, and stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. My mind wouldn't shut off. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. That guilty look when she opened the door. That smug bastard Mark standing there in his boxers. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hit something. But more than anything, I just wanted it to stop hurting. By morning, I had a plan. The first thing I did was call a lawyer. I wasn't about to let her screw me over any more than she already had. The guy I talked to, Rick, came highly recommended. He was calm, professional, and straight to the point. I told him everything, and he didn't mince words. You've got grounds for divorce, no question, he said. Adultery isn't just a betrayal, it's leverage. We'll use that. Hearing him talk so matter-of-factly about it should have made me feel better, but it didn't. It just made everything feel more real. My marriage was over. There was no coming back from this. While Rick got to work on the paperwork, I went back to the house. I wanted to get my stuff before Amy showed up. The last thing I needed was another confrontation. I couldn't trust myself to keep my cool if I saw her again. The place felt hollow when I walked in, like all the life had been sucked out of it. I packed up my clothes, a few personal things, and anything I couldn't bear to leave behind. But when I got to the living room, I stopped. There was a photo on the mantel. Our wedding day. Her in that white dress, smiling at me like I was her whole world. Me in my suit, looking at her like I couldn't believe I'd gotten so lucky. It was a lie now, but back then, it had been real. At least, I thought it had. I stared at that photo for a long time before finally taking it down. I didn't smash it. I didn't throw it away. I just set it face down on the table and walked out. The next few weeks were a blur. Amy texted me a couple of times, but I didn't answer. What was there to say? I didn't need her apologies, her excuses, or her empty promises. She made her choice, and now she had to live with it. Tom kept checking in on me, making sure I wasn't drowning in whiskey or doing anything stupid. He was the rock I didn't know I needed, dragging me out of the house when I wanted to wallow, reminding me that life wasn't over just because my marriage was. And then, one day, I got a call from Rick. She's agreed to the terms, he said. No contest. It's done. Just like that, it was official. Amy and I were no longer husband and wife. It should have felt like closure, but it didn't. It felt empty, like I'd lost a part of myself I'd never get back. A couple of months later, I ran into a mutual friend, Karen, the same one who'd commented on Amy's Instagram photo. She hesitated when she saw me, like she wasn't sure if she should say anything. But eventually, she did. I just wanted you to know, she said, her voice low. Amy and Mark, it didn't last. He dumped her. I didn't know how to respond to that. Was I supposed to feel vindicated? Happy that her little fling had blown up in her face? If I was being honest, it didn't make a damn difference to me. She was still gone. The damage was still done. Thanks for telling me, I said, and left it at that. It took a long time to start feeling normal again. To stop waking up in the middle of the night expecting to find her beside me. To stop second-guessing every decision I'd made, wondering if I could have done something differently. But eventually, I got there. Slowly but surely, I started putting myself back together. The house didn't feel like home anymore, so I sold it. I got a new place, smaller, quieter, but mine. And for the first time in years, I started thinking about what I wanted. Not us, not her. Me. I'm not going to lie and say I'm over it. Betrayal like that doesn't just go away. It leaves scars. But I've learned to live with them, to carry them without letting them weigh me down. And now? I'm okay. Not great, not perfect, but okay. I've got my life back. And if there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find yourself again.